Hi, welcome back to our ever-deepening journey into Source Life. We're now entering our 16th continuous meditation, guided meditation, ever deeper into an encounter of the first kind with the source of all of our being, our life, our cultures, our worlds. And thank you for staying with us. And at the end of our last 15th meditation, we took a pause to ask some deep questions because our journey from our opening meditation to where we are now has opened up some astounding disclosures in the ever-deepening quest of humanity to get to the source of all life, to being, to the fundamental word itself, across the planet, all our great traditions. And behind me, we've been working with a meditative visual, because this is not a lecture of information, because we saw that information is in the box. And meditation into the source is a journey to a direct encounter with the I am space of the awakened mind, a global space where we encounter reality in the deepest direct encounter. And all humans coming out of that space, we have that code within us. And in our journey, we have some of the astounding disclosures that really change our human self-understanding. It puts us in a new light and opens up new possibilities and a new technology when we get access to the source code that we really didn't have before. And all of our great geniuses through the ages have been calling upon us and trying to open different portals and pathways and strategies to get into the source, to get the missing source code where we can become fully human. And the visual behind me, we've been developing as a meditative visual, captures, let's say, 3,000 years of our human evolutionary journey to where we are now. I'll look at it with you in a moment just to remember and call out some of the amazing, astounding revelations or disclosures or discoveries as we enter source science. If we get the missing source code, we get it's a whole new portal and frontier for our human journey. A deeper understanding of who we are, of what's going on the planet now, of the amazing breakthroughs that we've had over centuries, but also the abysmal crisis that we humans face because we've been, as we've suggested, using a thought form that's so deep, that's been magnificent to give us our information technology, word power, word processing, mind processing, to process reality. And as great as it has been, it has also created blinders that we couldn't really see it from inside. And that's why getting the source code and going deeper, listening to our great wisdom teachers, allows us to see where we are in a deeper way that will allow us to celebrate the magnificent breakthroughs through the centuries, a great genius in our human genome, but also to see at the same time that we're lodged in deep pathologies, dysfunctions, crises that are really invisible, and we haven't been able to see. It took the source code and source science and source medicine to really see it. And we've been going step by step deeper into that. And I'll turn to remind us of some of the amazing themes and disclosures to bring us to where we are in this 16th meditation. At the end of our 15th meditation, we said that in the deeper language, the source language, where all of our worlds meet and originate, whatever name we use, I use the word logosophia for that, taking it from the Greek, for the fundamental field, the source. But to see that over eons of evolution, humanity has reached a level of technology, of consciousness, of language, of word process, of mind process, of processing and metabolizing the world around us and reality and what appears, that has really given us, like getting the fire, the power of logos, the word. There's been magnificent technology. But it has held us. It's so great. We've been addicted to it and couldn't see beyond it. And all our great teachers are calling us to take the next step, mature. It's an adolescent stage. As great as it is, and as good as we are, we need to rise higher, because if we don't, we get stuck and cut off from the source. And if we're desourced, we're going to be in deep human pathologies. And we call that the invisible crisis. It's invisible because you can't see it within the technology that we live that allows us to see. Our vision blinds us and gives us a blind spot that blocks us from stepping back more deeply to see our human condition in the light of the source science and source code. So in this visual that we've seen, we left off in the 15th meditation with the visual. And as we've seen, and this is just a quick review and summary to have you chime in again, because it's so easy to forget and so difficult to remember. So I'd like to just rehearse some of the main points to get to what I'd like to do today, which is this marker situated within the double parentheses. The double parentheses we saw was our meditative way to understand when we're in the deep space. And all of our great teachers, and culture has been happening here. Culture has been emerging in this space, and this is magnificent. It's millennia of the evolution of tapping the word power, which is the word power, the source word. So again, the double parentheses marks the infinite, open, fundamental field, the source of reality itself, of being, of word, of life, that is sourcing everything. It's infinite. And our great teachers tapping this space and trying to communicate it to us here. We humans are living at this information space, information age, which is magnificent, for, let's say, 3,000 years. Beyond that, but I'm using that as an example. For the past 3,000 years, this is a visual of our human evolutionary journey for, say, the past 3,000 years. And we're living here. And our languages here, our consciousness, our culture, our religions, our education, our politics, our economics, our cultures, all of them are going on with codes, powerful codes, here in this code. This is a code. And it cuts us off. This code, by its nature, sets up a boundary for us humans living here and not able to immediately enter this deep space, which is a call to our humanity to enter a direct encounter with the source here. So the double parentheses is a way to help us visualize and remember that there's a code that's deeper than our code here. But yet it's always, we live in the space of the infinite code. But somehow we get eclipsed and cut off from in our journey, and our cultures are unfolding here, and the magnificent developments, all of which could never happen without tapping the deep source. We've gone through this over 15 meditations, and I'm just trying to rehearse to bring us to the moment, because what I'd like to do with you in this, which has never been done before, in this way, and we urgently need to get it, is to understand what we're calling the motherboard of our cultures and worlds, religions, sciences, arts, politics. All of our human life and experience has been processed in this technology. It's a technology. It's a word and mind and culture-making technology. It's a motherboard. But when you realize and you step back to the source, you begin to see it can cut us off from the source, and therefore it becomes a smotherboard. It smothers us from entering and making a crossing. These arrows represent the great crossing and migration from being here into the space of the double bracket culture. It's a deeper technology of life, of word, of consciousness, of language, meaning, truth, knowledge, love, compassion, ethics, reason, here. So what we've seen in our journey meditatively is that when we step back and look at our great traditions, for example, the Yahweh tradition, Yahweh is the infinite, or the Om tradition, Om is the infinite, Brahman, Allah, the Allah tradition, the infinite, the Logos, the infinite word, the infinite source of all reason, the Logos. These are all names for the infinite. And the infinite, but we are using language here, and we are listening to these teachers in our way. The teachers are trying to open up this journey into the infinite source of connection and human reason, where we experience a deep unum. I use the Latin because the infinite code, the infinite space, the infinite beginning, whether we call it Allah or Logos or Yahweh or Brahman or Tao or Spirit, or whatever name we use for the infinite, one thing that becomes clear, it must be infinitely one. You can't have more than, you can't multiply it, you can't divide it. The infinite first, source, is infinitely one. And let's use a special word, let's use unum, the Latin, for infinite unity. which is world changing if we can get it, because we're going to use unity the way we know it here. We're going to say unity because that's how we think here in this level of language and development. We've seen that although this has taken eons to arrive at this amazing technology of information processing here, and we, the thinker, whatever lens we're using a motherboard to make our worlds and our meaning and our truth and our feelings and our belief systems and our paradigms, on and on. All of our life is proceeding in this technology, which is amazing. And we have magnificent developments, but our great geniuses, Moses, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Socrates, Mohammed, on and on. They're saying, folks, we've got to rise to this technology. We've got to surrender and let go of our adolescent caterpillar to become the butterfly. We've got to mature. Great as this is, it's retarding us from making a migration, deeper evolution shift into a more mature technology of word. Because in the infinite space, it's infinitely one, and call it the Word. In the beginning is the Word, the infinite Word. John picks up on that in the Gospel. In the beginning is the Logos. The Greek word, the Logos, is for reason, light, mind, speech. The Word. They're all connected. Because of the unum, you can't break it apart. The Word is life, is being, is truth, is love, is God, is source, is presence. That's the unum power. We haven't really developed the tools. The tools of the mind here cannot sufficiently handle the unum axiom of the infinite missing language and code. The unum code. And the unum, because it's infinite, the infinite. So the double parentheses is always a mark of the infinite, and the infinite is the space of all possible worlds, all narratives, all worldviews. Any experience whatsoever cannot happen outside of the source field, because it's infinite. There's no outside of it. You can't other it from the outside, because if you were to other it, you will demote it from being infinite. And we haven't seen that sufficient. You can't say, if you use God talk, we don't have to use God talk if you've seen, but if we say God is over there, that's a huge blunder. If God is infinite, you can't push it away. It becomes infinite unum. Whatever name we use, how many names does the infinite word or the infinite source or the infinite being or reality, infinite reality, how many names? Infinite names. How many first names? Infinite. Allah, Yahweh, Brahman, Tao, Om, Buddha nature, Shunyata, on and on. They connect. They can't not connect. The infinite name, infinitely unum, that doesn't mean it means the same. That word same is here. It means that it's infinitely sourcing in the unum code, the infinite code. And the greatest journey of humanity is tapping the unum, getting back to the source, developing our consciousness and our language power and our word power and our technology of mind and culture making and love making to enter and dare to enter into the unum space where everything is interconnected. We hear that a lot in our culture. Everything is connected. That's news from here. We have news. But the news that all things are connected is not the same as going into the connection directly. Those are one of the astounding disclosures that emerge for us in our meditative journey. Across the board. If it's Moses at the burning bush and bringing the laws of God, the source code, the laws of Yahweh and God brought down to the human situation to put in our stone writing and our level of information writing and bullet points, doesn't capture the living power of the command of connection and honoring God with all our hearts and minds and being. We cannot get the commands, the codes of the infinite downloaded. That's what these arrows mean. We can download it. What we do is, since we live here and this is our word, so I have a lens and this is my word. This is the screen we saw. This space is the screen in which all of our experience, our feelings, our thoughts, our beliefs, the events that appear, our world, with all of their multiplicity, because this is a code and it can generate boundless alternative worldviews and codes and languages. Swahili and German and French and We have all of these human languages. They're all coded. A language is coded. We call it a grammar, call it a syntax with semantic rules. We don't want to get technical. We can see that when we use a language, French has its own coherent rules and conventions as a culture. And German, and English, and Swahili, Hebrew, Sanskrit, Chinese, on and on. The boundless human languages are all different alternative coded information using this technology. That's why we can translate. We can translate from French to German to Swahili to English, allegedly, because there's a common source. That's a common code that's funding them all. If that weren't the case, if there were not an unum connection across our many languages, we would not be able to translate with one another. They're different codes. So the Chinese code and the Egyptian code, the Arabic code and the Hebrew code and the Sanskrit code, and on, all of the dialects, they're different coded. But all of these codes trace to a fundamental motherboard. That's the point. And that's what I want to focus with us today in this meditation number 16, after we just rehearse and recollect some of the amazing disclosures that are world-changing for us, if you can tap the source code and the source science. That's what we've really seen, one of the astounding, that humanity has been for eons seeking to pioneer from an adolescent motherboard that gives us beautiful information and word and mind and consciousness and culture power to get civilization and get it going. And all of our conventions and political forms of life are here. But we're downloading from a deeper space. So when our great teachers look into this unum space, and we saw this is I, what's this I and the other? With the infinite, it's infinitely connected. The unum means infinite connection. That is mind-boggling, as we've seen. It means that although we can separate and do separate mind and word and thought and fact and reality and all of these things are divided here, because that's the motherboard we're using, and that's what we want to look at together. Where did that come from? Is that really there? We saw in our prior meditation that you can't, when we're living and seeing here, we get our vision and meaning and truth and beliefs and experience here. This mind cannot stand back here to see the motherboard. The motherboard empowers us to have vision. And the vision here blinds us to stepping back to seeing the technology. The mind and word technology that empowers us to see and have meaning and experience and phenomena and a world around us that makes sense. That's vision. That's amazing. We're getting word power. We're tapping the logos power, it's amazing technology, information. And now in the digital age, it's flourished into the Google power to get information transfer around in a planetary way with the digital technology, which comes from the digital technology is a logic, it's an operating system, it's a program. And to put it in different terms, that what we begin to see across the planet, and you can only see it when you step back from this space into the double bracket lens. When this space opens, now you can really see what's going on here. You can't see it within it, you've got to step back deeper, and that's a journey. Can we get the missing source code, which is here, that gives us the vision and science and power and reason to see more deeply into an adolescent stage of our human condition. Because when you're here, this is all we can see. It becomes absolute. But when we go deeper, if we listen to the Buddha wants us to go here. As we've seen before, the Buddha was saying, this is reality. Everything is interflow. Everything is interconnected. But we're living here, and we're cut off, and we're desourced, and we suffer. So the Buddha medicine was to see the first philosophy, first science. Deep ontology. Ontology is the science of being. And it's been eclipsed by the science we have here because we can't see and tap into being directly. And here, what does it mean to be a human when you're here in the space? I'm here and we're having an experience, I and my culture, and we share a lens. Say I'm an American, French citizen, whatever we are, one of the African nations, it doesn't matter, wherever we are in our culture, and they're multicultures. Within, say, the American scene, we have many different subcultures within that cultural space. In the culture of science, I have a science world. In the culture of being a Christian, I have a Christian world. As you've seen, I'm just rehearsing. So this technology allows us to have boundless alternative worlds, paradigm shifts, new stories. All of our stories are coming here, but they're all made possible by the infinite word. Any narrative, story, worldview, belief system we have, scientific, artistic, feeling, emotional, it doesn't matter, all of them are coming out, and they couldn't have it without the source word. The infinite word is sourcing every breath at every moment. And one of the astounding things we began to see is, wow, when you listen to Buddha, who's saying we've got to cross into the Buddha space, which is here, the infinite connection. What's that? That's a different language. The Buddha language is opening up a deeper connection with the source code language. The Buddha field of everything being interconnected. Nothing can be, space and time and mind and body and word and world, they all interflow. And that's the I-thou space. This double bracket language here, word power here, is a powerful, deeper form of word, tapping the source, than word here. But when we live here, all we know is this. So when we hear Buddha, we bring Buddha here in our word. If we hear Moses, we put Moses here. If we hear Jesus, Jesus says, I am the word, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. Weird talk. But it's speaking the double bracket source language, the logos code. The logos in the flesh is a word in the flesh. It's a deeper word. It's an integral word. It's a holistic word. It's a fractal word. It's everything is interconnected. And I am connected with the other. I am connected with you. I am connected with nature, with everything around me. That's the infinite connection when you enter into this culture. And if you download it here and you say, well, Jesus is my Lord and I believe in Jesus and Jesus saves, and you're taking it, the deep living word, and bringing it into a space of content, of information. Living word here, objectified, inert word here. It dies here. Language, words here do not have the same life force as words that are living in the flesh, in the Buddha space, in the Jesus space, in the Krishna yoga space. On and on. So our geniuses are seeing, looking at the human condition, stepping back. Lord Krishna, who's the Om voice, speaking the Om language, is speaking to Arjuna here, who is here and caught here in a war. And he only knows this language. And Krishna tries to educate him, to move him step by step, to get him to know how to enter the Om, the Brahman, the Atman, the awakened self. So when the self goes into the zone, we awaken, and we are in a deeper language of connectivity and flow with each other and with nature and with the source. We're in a form of communion with the source. And it's a fractal space to live. It's a higher culture. It's called the awakened mind. It's called enlightenment. It's global in power in the sense that all languages, all of our languages, vast, diverse languages, worldviews, scriptures, all of these vast, diverse arts and worldviews and lenses and narratives are situated in the infinite word, are sourced by it. We couldn't breathe without the source. We couldn't have an identity, my own separate space and my stuff. We couldn't have that without the source. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't see without the source. That's one of the astounding disclosures of source science when you get the science here. The Tao that is named is not the Tao we hear in Lao Tzu. So we've seen in our journey so far that our great geniuses are calling us to upscript this line, upscript into the humanized word, where we become fully integral, and that's ethics. That's when we have compassion for one another because we can see and experience ourselves in the I-thou space, not I-it. This mind operating system, it's a matrix. And cultures are here, developed over millennia to rise to this point. So let's say for 3,000 years, just to jump in, we've been living under the dominance of a regime, of a motherboard, a matrix that somehow cuts us off and creates a blinder from going more deeply. And our great teachers are seeing into the crossing, the evolutionary maturation into the source, and urging us to upscript. Not to download, but to upscript into the deeper living language, the awakened mind, where the mind and the word and the world and I and thou are connected. It's I-thou means it's an organic unbridgeable unum connection with one another. And that's why the unum is pluribus, we saw. Unum, infinite unity, is infinitely plural. And that was picked up in the founding vision of the American Way, for example. We talked in I think it's the fourth meditation, the unfinished human revolution and the unfinished American Revolution, because if we read the 1776 founding vision, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that we're endowed by the source with inalienable rights. It's very profound science. But if we read 1776 here, where we usually do, this is our language, we miss the force of the founding 1776, for example. And so the unfinished American revolution, is to finally cross as a people, as a culture, into the deep space, the deep dialogue. Dialogos. Dialogue is deep. It means that we can really listen to one another in a pluribus diversity. So unum is pluribus. That's been missed in our historical journey. We can't get it here. Plurality means many, and our worlds are divided. And unity doesn't mean to overcome our divisions to find unity. Unum unity allows multiple profound diversity. So if the space of democracy is unum pluribus, multicultural, multi-perspective, multi-narrative, individuality, where individuals flourish, then we do need the double bracket code, the Logos code, the Logos Sophia. So we can use many different names, the Yahweh name, the Allah name, the Brahman name, the Om name, the Tao name, on and on. I focused in on the Greek Logos Sophia. In a way, because I'm playing on Logos is science, Logos is logic, it's reason. And in a way, when we don't use God divine names, but the Logos, which is divine, the Logos Sophia, and I use them as one. Logos Sophia. Sophia is wisdom. And wisdom is a source science, first science. And the early philosophers like Aristotle were trying to get to first the science of being. The science of being is here to get to the Logos, Sophia. Sophia is the embodiment of being, of wisdom, of human intelligence. The feminine, divine, feminine, Logos Sophia, one word. I'm using that, but all of the infinite names are connected together. We could choose Yahweh, we could choose Allah, we could choose Brahman or Om, or Buddha nature, or Tao, on and on across the planet, all of our first names, if they're genuine. They're infinite, unum pluribus. That has not been seen. That's astounding. Because if we got the science here, if we don't download it here, where Allah, Yahweh, Om, Tao are all broken apart, and religious wars and ideological wars take place in the space that separates this technology, we've not understood sufficiently why our great geniuses are saying this is going to cause a human disaster. It is a human disaster if we get stuck there, and it's going to break us from source, the place of love and compassion and flourishing in life, and our journey is to mature into the double bracket, word power. It's a deeper form of language, a deeper form of using our consciousness, as you've seen. And all of our scriptures are trying to get us to give the script. So the word of God is here, and we download it to where we are, to our word as we know it. Because that's all we've got. That's what we know. We don't know how to translate. And that was the question of number 15. After all of these ever-deepening meditations, to see this 3,000-year condition of the humanity summed up in one visual, that in the beginning, the infinite unum, the infinite is infinitely present, and we cannot get outside of it. It's infinitely one, unum pluribus. And yet, our human development of using a form of language and word power that's magnificent and allowed us to have meaning and truth and belief systems and arts and sciences and politics and civilization. We could tap the fire. It's a kind of technology of the fire of the Logos. We could tame it and use it in our word power and information. We have information here. And there's a code, a deep code. Let's call it a matrix. It's a matrix. So what's a matrix? It's a mind operating technology. And this mind operating technology, ultimate technology, is a technology of word power and consciousness, the technology of being. It's like a DNA code. that gives us the power to have a life, to have meaning and truth and worlds and beliefs and stories and narratives and mythologies and all that we've had, and to build beautiful cathedrals and temples and mosques and synagogues. All of the beautiful arts and sciences are coming out of this technology, and yet it creates a desource, it creates a barrier, because with all of its power to give us vision here, it blinds us. The vision here blinds us to a deeper vision, a source vision. And you can't fake it. You've got to cross into, you've got to upscript. And all of yoga, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is coaching Arjuna, the everyday person, using this matrix or technology or motherboard or smotherboard, because it cuts us off, to cross step by step into getting the literacy of the first eye, the third eye, the open mind, the awakened reason. So all of Buddha is saying this is suffering, and that's fine with mindfulness. When we become mindful, we become wordful, and we enter presence. On the struggle with Abraham to let go of Isaac and put God first is nothing less than a journey into the Word of God, into the presence, into the burning bush is here, in the presence of the infinite. It's not that the infinite isn't here in our everyday lives. You can't be outside of the infinite. In every point, here or here, it's ever present. That's why geniuses like Blake would say, there's infinity in a grain of sand, and eternity in 1 hour, in an hour. For example, that's science. It's speaking this science, source science. So one of the amazing disclosures of our journey into source life, meditative journeys, guided meditation into source life, is a guidance to get the missing code, the language, and to get more literate, and not to download our great teachers into our terms, but to upscript ourselves into get the code of the Buddha, the code of Moses, the code of Jesus. Imagine if Jesus is the code, the Logos in the flesh, and saying, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, and this is the life. And when you hear that speech and you listen to Buddha, then Buddha is a different narrative of teaching that science. Buddha might say, I am the life, this is the Buddha space, I am the Dharma, I am one with the source. Krishna, in teaching the Om, is saying, I am the world, I am the spirit. There's a language here that is echoed across these great geniuses differently. I'm not saying they're the same. They're different. And they can afford to be different because the Unam is pluribus. The infinite has infinite diversity built into it. And so one of the astounding disclosures that came out for us in our journey, it's taken me a time to just rehearse it, because it's easy to forget this, even though these have been mega themes in 15 guided meditations, and we could go back and they're there for you to review them and bring us back here. But I'm building up to this one point that I hope in the 16th meditation we can focus in completely and to see what has never been seen before in the source science. And it's all important, because if we could see the motherboard, if we could see the matrix that we're in, that across the planet, all of our genius, and all of our genius, of course, comes from the source. I hope that's one of the axioms of source science. We couldn't breathe and have a breath or a thought or a breakthrough or any advance without the source. There's no way to step outside of the source. Secondly, or firstly, the infinite is infinitely unum. That's another axiom, the unum axiom, that it's infinitely one. The unum is infinitely plural, the pluribus axiom. Unum is pluribus. The infinite is boundless, infinitely one, infinitely diverse, and immediately it sources all things. That's an axiom of source science. Every word is sourced by the infinite word. Every breath, every iota, every grain of sand, every atom, every electron is sourced. Nothing cannot be sourced. You can't cut off. Why? Because source science teaches us that the infinite cannot be pushed away. Here we could think it's over there. God is over there, or if you use God talk, or the infinite, or Om, or Brahman, or Buddha nature is over there. No, the infinite can't be over there. It's everywhere. It's right here. In every breath, where we are. You can't have, we have the created world and then there's the heaven over there. No, it doesn't make sense. It's bad science. This has not been sufficiently seen in our evolutionary history, that the infinite is infinitely one, and all of our great infinite narratives and first names must be connected. So Allah and Yahweh and Brahman and Om and Tao must hang out intimately. Not the same, because they don't have to be, because there's infinite diversity within the infinite principle. And the infinite other possibilities yet to arise, always possible. And what that means is that all of our worldviews are connected. And yet in this technology that we live, the motherboard, everything is still divided and separated, because that's the nature of that code. That's what I'd like to focus more deeply on. Can we show with source science that there is a motherboard, a matrix, that holds humanity captive, that cuts us off from access to deep source? And in a way, this is a colonized place. It's a cage. It's a cave. We have to leave the cave to go into the light. There are many different metaphors we might use. As much as we have human genius being sourced always by the source, it's the source that's giving us the breakthroughs to all of our greatest scientific, philosophical, spiritual, political breakthroughs are coming from the source. And we want to take credit because we don't know how to give credit where it's due, which is to understand that I couldn't breathe without the source. We couldn't have insights and breakthroughs without the source. We can't push the source away. Therefore, it's infinitely here. And that's astounding, because scary, because you realize that right where I am, the infinite must be pervading me inside and out at every moment. And the great geniuses knew that. For example, advanced Quaker mystics, Christians say there's that of God in every person. Or in the Hindu yoga tradition, Om is in everything. Om is in all of us. Or when Arjuna wakes up and opens his first eye, his third eye in chapter 11 of the Bhagavad Gita, he said, Krishna, you're everywhere. You're in the grass, you're in the tree, you're everywhere. That's right. The infinite is everywhere and every when, and infinitely here, now, and that's presence. Which means what? It's radical. It means that in deep ontological science, ontology is the science of being, ontos from the Greek is being, and being is the infinite, the source, the first principle is infinite. Ontos logos, ontology is first science, and this science that all of our great teachers are calling out, you don't have to have God talk. If you're put off by God talk because you're not spiritual, you're not religious, that's okay. But you can't ignore the science. The science of being, of source, shows that reality is infinitely here now presence. So the unum axiom of the infinite implies infinite presence in every breath. And there's that of the infinite in every moment, in every person, in every item in the universe. And that's basic science. And if we could handle that, if we could get that, then you can't get it from this technology. This barrier has to be faced and overcome. So what we did at the end of our last meditation, and it's taken a while to rehearse, and I think we have to do this because to refresh constantly to see what is so forgettable, even though it's unforgettable. How can we forget that the infinite is here in every breath? And yet it's the most forgettable and oblivious. What's most obvious in source science, the most obvious axiom is that the infinite is here now and funding our every breath, unless we should tune into it. That's a call of the infinite. And that's the most obvious, that reality is obviously the infinite presence. That's our science. And yet it's the most oblivious. That we enter oblivion when we're living in this space in a flat-footed way, and this is reason. And I use single brackets. That's one of the points. Double brackets means infinite language and source, making the great course into our source, and our source language and reason and script and ethics and culture and meaning and truth here. And single bracket is the motherboard we're speaking of, the smother board, that somehow cuts us off from access to source and divides boundlessly into separate items and units. And everything is divided. And because this technology divides, it's a baby step. If you name something, that's a chair, that's a glass, that's a window, whatever you name, you give it a separate item, an ID. And we do that to make our language work. The principle of identity, ID. Everything has an ID and it has a separate name. And we put them together in pieces of information. Socrates is wise. I am a human. I am a man. We make our information here. I, the thinker, here, who is conscious and having my experience, process it in this space with this matrix into information, mind bites, and things show up. I see the orange, I eat the orange. I see the pen. The pen is here. I see the pen. I see the pen. I am a man. I am a citizen. Whatever it is, information is all here. I am angry. My feelings, my emotions, everything is right here. And one of the experiments we performed along the way in the meditations to begin to realize the power of this, I can put the pen in this mind space, in this code, but I could also put the pen here. I can't see the pen. That pen, I must cross into the I am space. This is the I am. And when I am I thou. The I am is I thou and connected, infinitely connected with the entire ecology. And so if I can see the pen here, what a magnificent breakthrough. This pen is, in this it's just an object. It's a mere pen made of plastic, disposable, and so forth. And so we make ourselves here. I manufacture myself in this technology. So I become objectified, I become an entity, I become something. And I feel I want to be somebody. I want to have my own reputation. I want to have my things, my belongings, my stuff all here. We create ourselves here. And Buddha saw if you make yourself here, you're going to be participating in a kind of death, because mindfulness is here. And this is thoughtless. Thinking here is thoughtless. Mind here is mindless. Life here is lifeless. Words here are wordless. When you're here, it's wordful, mindful, thoughtful, beingful. And this is happiness. This is well-being. Being is well-being when you're in the zone. And the greatest call of our teachers is we've got to make the crossing. Stop downloading this technology. It's a different technology. Because every word here connects with every word else. Every item, every iota is interconnected with the infinite unum interflow. So the question we ended in our last meditation was, given the language here of our great teachers across the planet whom we revere, are speaking the source code, the God code, the Christ code, the Buddha code, the Yoga code, the Om code, the Tao code, the Allah code. And we here don't have access to that code, but we use the code we have that has us, it holds us. We live inside this space. This code, whatever it means, and that's really what I'm focusing on in this meditation. Because a question I left us with in our last meditation is, why has it been so difficult to cross this boundary, to make this crossing for millennia? Despite the call of our great teachers urging us and coaching us to make the crossing, we've remained captive in this space, colonized. And we're not free. We're not full, free, human, mature beings in this space. Our cultures are stunted. Our lives are fragmented. Our alternative worldviews and cultures and religions are alienated and can't connect. There is no dialogue. It's monologue. The mono-mind, the monologue is here. The dialogue is here. And we saw that we're in an invisible crisis because we can't see the mind operating matrix that holds us here in this space. And that this, because it fragments and breaks, is breaking us apart, personally and interpersonally and interculturally. And in every way, it's fragment. It's a fragmenting. Even though it gives us a stage of making sense and putting things together. As we synthesize pieces and words and make sense, here, it's an artificial level of development. So at the end of last meditation, we ask, why is it so profoundly difficult over centuries to really upscript and make this crossing to get the missing word of our great teachers and scriptures and enlightenment and wisdom? Wisdom is here, not here. And yet we download it. So there are two different languages. This language, monocentric, monologue in this space, desourced language, this is language. This line means we're cut off from the source, or we're desourced. And to be desourced is to suffer and anguish, and to be cut off from the light and from truth and from well-being and human flourishing, which is to make the crossing into the zone of being, of light, of life, to awaken the mind and cross. So the language here is a deeper, powerful word process in the unum space than the language development that we have here. So we have a deep predicament. The question we had at the end of our last meditation, we can see why there's a deep translation problem between when Krishna speaks, when Jesus speaks, when Buddha speaks, when the Quran speaks and speaks the word of source. And we have this word and this process. And we can't fake it. This is the word we know and use. We translate it and perhaps mistranslate the word of God, the word of source, into our words. So there's a translation problem. When Jesus speaks here, we hear him here. When Krishna speaks to Arjuna, Arjuna struggles to process him here. When Buddha speaks, we try to understand Buddha here. So there's a profound translation problem between this language form and this code and this code. The source code, right, the unum code, understands the laws of connectivity and connection, and everything is coherent and interconnected. That's when you're enlightened and awakened, and that's where wisdom. And that's well-being. So when we say we hold these truths to be self-evident, life, liberty, well-being, happiness, freedom is here. But if we hear it in this language that we know, that we're mishearing it, we're not getting it. If we have Jesus here, we don't have Jesus. If we do yoga here, we're not doing yoga. If we talk about the Buddha, the bullet points, the Four Noble Truths here, we don't have the Noble Truths, and so on. So we ask that question, why is it so abysmally difficult for centuries? And we've been stalled and stuck in this samsara, in this space of being cut off. What does it take to cross over? How do we get the code, the missing code that opens up the space in our human journey of evolution? And so what I'd like, and that we're going to, in the next 2-3 meditations, 16, this one, 17, 18, we're warming up again. And what I would like to focus as we wrap up this meditation is to understand, where does this motherboard come from, allegedly? We've said it's there. And our great teachers have seen there is some kind of mind processing, a code that is holding us and cutting off and separating things, right? We want to talk more about the origin of this code. And we can't see it inside. Since we live here, we can't see the code. We have to step into the deeper space, into the source code, the source science. The unum science, the source science, will give us the lens power to understand, where does that single bracket matrix come from? What's up with that? And one of the things I'd like to move more deeply in this meditation, and we'll develop it in the next 2 or 3 meditations together, we're going to see that 2 or 3 themes that I invite you to join as we go. We need to really see where this motherboard, there is a motherboard. We haven't recognized that because it's what makes it possible for us to have a language and to see it, to have a culture. There's a motherboard, that's a single bracket. This. And our lives across the planet are transpiring with this technology. It's a profound technology of information where we can name things and make sense of things and have beliefs and feelings and emotions and insights and change the different stories. We could have one world story and you could change your story. You didn't have the Jesus story and now you got the gospel and you change your story. It made a big difference. When you change your story, you change your life. Yes, because we are as we mind is one of the astounding disclosures of source science. We encountered that earlier in the 2nd and 3rd meditation. We are as we mind. Our being, who we are, depends on the mind technology we use. If we're using this and being used by this, and that's the point I'd like to stress, that when we're implanted in this stage of development and using a motherboard that's a smotherboard, we can't see it. We're stuck in a colonized life. And our great teachers knew that. We're bound. We're not free. We're not free range. We're caged by a mind process. So if we're minding with this, this is our technology of mind. It's huge, it's profound. The word processing is a mind technology of consciousness, and therefore we make our experience and our worlds and our lives and our identities and our stories with this technology. And, and that's where we live. If we live here, that's who we are. If we live here, using a different technology of mind and consciousness and word, if you could live in the Christ space, we have a Christ life. If we live in the Buddha space, Buddha life. Yoga space, yoga life. Socrates space, we have a Logos life. But if we're living here and using this, we're going to have a life here. And the great teachers are saying, if you get stuck here, under the dominance of a regime, of a motherboard, that's a matrix, that's a smother board, and cuts us off from source, if we're desourced, we're in trouble. If we're desourced, we're in trouble. And the last 3,000 years is just evidence of our abysmal struggle to make the crossing and hitting the walls of a matrix and a motherboard that we can't really see clearly enough. And so what I'm doing in the 16th meditation, as we rehearse the magnificent unfolding of the journey to source life, which is here, which is a human evolutionary journey, of all great teachers calling it out, we're focusing on this single bracket technology. Why does it hold us captive? Why does it hold us captive? Why are our lives here, in crisis? Personally, interpersonally, culturally, interculturally, interreligious, political. The civic space is broken. Democracy can't flourish here. We have to go into the space of the demos, we the people, where we connect in the unum pluribus in order to have a democracy. All of these are magnificent themes. And so what we have to say is, okay, we need to see the single bracket motherboard. So that has not been seen, I'm suggesting. And the point of this meditation is to focus our full attention of that there is a motherboard. And why? How does it come? How do I see it? How do I get to see this? Because if I could see it, and you can't see it from within it, you've got to step outside of it into a deeper space, into the source code. And listen to our great teachers and say, oh, I see it now. What does it do? It separates the thinker from what is thought. It separates this line. This technology, as great as it is in giving us information and content, here, it's an information technology, and everything is informationized here. Then I, the thinker, consciousness, the subject who is thinking, has content that's given. And I can manage it here and make sense of the things and have beliefs and stories and identification and stuff and my culture, my economics, all going on here. So one of the marks of the single bracket is it separates us from the source of interflow with pluribus unum. Our great teachers, this has been named repeatedly across history. In the biblical tradition, the fall from grace, being here, is sin. This line of separation that desources us, call it sin in the biblical language. In the East, samsara. What is samsara? The cycle of birth and rebirth in a place of suffering and alienation from self, from Atman, from Brahman, from Buddha, from truth, from being. If we're cut off from reality, we suffer. So these red and black lines mark this cut is huge, and it's been seen in so many different ways through the centuries in different cultures, named differently, but the source science says, well, the sin cut and the samsara are the same existential cut, being cut off from source. And that gives us the main event of human life is to cross that line and find our way. How are we going to do that? Well, we can't do it from here. So one of the great lessons for centuries, and certainly in the last decades, if you look at it, the best attempts to solve our problem here hit the wall and get stalled. Activism here cannot cross and solve the crises, the invisible crises we get from this motherboard are churning here and worsening like a virus. And we see it in different ways, and we want to do activism to solve it. We want to solve our problems. And we try to name it and face it and do the best we can. But the great teachers know that to solve it, we've got to go here. Because why? Because this is generating the crisis. So the single bracket technology, which is a fragmenting, slashing technology that cuts us off from being and reality and truth and life and well-being, is a deep source of a medical problem in a medical ontology. And so what we're called upon in our journey, and that's what I want to open up this theme. The theme of 15 is there's a translation problem between the language here, the source code language, and the smotherboard language, the smother code. They're two different codes. This is an image or a code that separates and divides and separates consciousness from the object. The world is here, the events are here, my name is here, my being is here. Right? So I, the thinker, have a world. We, the people, have a world. And our culture is here, and in many different codes of cultures. So this code is a very powerful code that can generate boundless alternatives. We can have many different worlds and stories and narratives and fiction and identities and so forth. It's boundlessly deep. It's a fantastic technology. So there are many different codes. So you have French, you can have French grammar. That's a code to give us. You play a game, soccer. That's a code. The soccer ball and the boundaries and so forth. Baseball is another code. Chess is another code. Right? All the games we play are coded. All the languages we speak are coded. And we couldn't translate across languages if we didn't have a connection, unum, to link them. And our great teachers knew that. We have to have a deep logic. And logic comes from logos, and logos is a deep logic. The source logic is deep, and it's an unum power to connect, where everything is connected, and we can't get it directly here because we're here. In the divided logic. This is a logic. And logic is a code, and it gives us many different worldviews. And we can change. We have a lot of wiggle room here. So if a life coach says, change your story, think positive, or whatever our best-selling authors are saying to us here, and we read it here, if they speak in this space, it's not going to get us into this space. If we meditate here, it's not going to get us here. If we do yoga here, it's not going to get us there. If we worship Christ here, or God here, or follow Moses, the laws of Moses, the Torah here, it's not going to get us here. If we're doing science here, it's going to be sub-science. It's not going to be deep science. So this is very serious. It is of ultimate importance that we begin to say, what is this motherboard that has so much code power? Where does it come from? How does it work? How can it be that everything in my life, whatever it is in my culture, and all of our cultures are here in every aspect of our culture, and all the brilliant artistic developments and scientific breakthroughs are here, and they're funded by the source when you're using this technology. And we want to take credit for it because we can't see, no, I couldn't be without the source. We've got to honor the source as funding whatever takes place here is being sourced in the deep space. And so when we're desourced, we can't see that, and we're cut off from the light and from the life, and we suffer. So I'm inviting us to think more deeply about what is this motherboard that we've been living, it's been holding us captive across the planet in every aspect of our cultural lives. In everything we do, we're under this motherboard, we're in that regime. We're colonized by it, according to our great teachers and according to source science. And it's of the highest urgency that we get it. So what we're doing in this journey into source is to see the depth of the motherboard that is a smotherboard. So this motherboard is a smotherboard. It holds us cut off from the light and from the life and from self. And when we enter the real motherboard, this is the motherboard, and the motherboard, the deep unum board, is making all of these codes possible. Every code comes from the source code. It's a download. So somehow we need to focus on what's not been seen clearly in our human journey and listening to our great teachers, because they're scattered. What Jesus does over here, what Moses does there, what Muhammad does there, what Lao Tzu does over there, what Lord Krishna does here, they're separate stories, because the separator keeps them separate. But when you look at it from the source, you see that these are connected. These vastly diverse narratives of genius are connected. They're tapping the Unum code. And they're calling humanity in very different strategies and narrative forms to make a crossing into the medically awakened space, to heal the brokenness and fragmentation that inevitably comes from this motherboard. So because we've not been able to see this motherboard, it's smothered us. It's held us captive. And the best teaching of our great teachers, we can't hear it, we can't see it, we can't respond to it, we can't get the source code. And these guided meditations are attempting to do what's not been seen this way before. This is attempting to open up new territory, to give us this visual so we could see the human condition is here. And our journey is to here. And we're hitting a barrier. And we're mistranslating. And we can't make the crossing. What does it take for us to make the crossing? Because our survival depends upon it. So we're really focusing attention on, there is this motherboard, and everything we've been doing for, let's say, the 3,000 years is under this motherboard across the planet. And that's astounding to realize. And so we can't just look the other way and just say we have a motherboard and it's this motherboard. We've got to really show that it's working. So what I'd like to do in our follow-up meditation, continuing this very question, it's going to take us 2 or 3 meditations, guided meditations, to really get the science. In the next meditation, please stay with us. We're going to take a pause now. That's a lot to rehearse and remember and digest, and to see where we're going in 17, 18, the next 2 meditations. In the next meditation, I'd like to just pause and step back and help us see, by looking at the journey from Socrates to contemporary philosophy. Follow the line from Socrates, all the great geniuses of the Greco-European journey, from up to Locke, Berkeley, Hume, Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, Kant, Hegel, Heidegger. I know that they sound like fancy philosophers' names and you don't want to do philosophy. Sure, I understand that. That's not the point. We're not going to do philosophy. I'm just trying to show that when you look at the 2,500-year history from Socrates to now, or you look at the great biblical tradition from Moses to Jesus, Muhammad to now in the 21st century, or you look at Buddha 2,500 years ago, all the way through to Nagarjuna, to Tibet and Nepal and Chan Buddhism in China, and into Zen, from Buddha to Zen. 2,500 years. What's going on? It's a magnificent drama of helping people who are hitting this wall to find the crossing into the Zen space. It's trying to help people find the Jesus here. Jesus is within us. The Quakers, for example. Jesus is not here. Jesus is here. It's in us. God is not over there. God is pervading us at all times. All of the Muslim genius brought through by Muhammad in the Quran, surrender to Allah. Why surrender? Because it means it's a scientific principle. What is first? Honor is first. That is surrender. What are you surrendering? Your motherboard. What is that? Giving up your story. What does that mean, giving up your ID? So that your ID can really come out. So the path of sacrifice, crossing, is that something deep and scary has to happen to make the crossing from this place that we're normal and is comfortable relatively, even though it's a disaster and painful, to make the crossing into the love space, the compassion space, where we flourish as whole human beings. So what I'd like to do in the follow-up is to just go with you in a fast scan. It's a lot I'm asking of us, but I'll take us from Socrates all the way through the centuries into the contemporary European Anglo-American situation of where's philosophy now? How did it get here from Socrates to us? How do we go from Buddha to Zen? How do we go from the ancient rishis of the Upanishads of the Hindu breakthrough into the science of Brahman and the Bhagavad Gita and the Brahma Sutra all the way through to Aurobindo in the 20th century? From ancient yoga to now. Yoga now. How did we get here? What's going on? What's driving it? So whether we go through from Socrates to now, or from Moses and Jesus all the way to now, or yoga in the ancient times to now, or Buddha to Zen, whatever, we'll use examples to say, wow, there's something amazing driving human evolutionary history. What is the driver? The call of the infinite force that's holding us together. It's calling us. The infinite force, the greatest force, is calling us in every breath, at every moment, to rise and make the crossing. And our great traditions have been struggling with the boundary, with overcoming this boundary and breaking the shackles of this colonized space to make our crossing. So in Martin Luther King, for example, in the civil rights movement, is saying, I have a dream. I may not get there with you. Speaking to the American civic divided culture here, which is always going to be divided. And to see that the path of democracy is to rise here. And that's what 1776 is calling us. When you read 1776 Declaration of Independence, what is it saying in the opening of the Declaration? Please read it. We went over that in the fifth meditation, the Unfinished American Revolution. How to read 1776 with this text rather than this. So the visionaries, the founding visionaries, were seeing that we hold these truths to be self-evident. That's this talk. 1776 here is not the same as 1776 here. And it's saying whenever any band, political band, code, covenant, matrix, thought form, cuts us off from our dignity, it's our duty to separate. So the principle of independence is to separate from the smother board that's holding us colonized in this space to rise into the space of we the people. Unum pluribus. Here. This is huge what I'm suggesting. That if, say, American culture is still living in this space which is colonized and we're not free people and we're broken and fragmented and imploding in an unsustainable culture because we need the code to flourish. So when Martin Luther King is saying, I may not get there with you, but we're going to get there. What's that? The I-thou, dialogue, not the monologue. This is monologue, this is dialogue. I know, obviously I'm passionate about this because I feel that over my 50, 60 years of focusing as a lover of Sophia, philosophy, and listening to the call of the Unum, the unified force of reason, and the light of reason and enlightenment, and reading and teaching these texts and across the planet for decades, and seeing that there's a missing code and trying to bring it out to humanity because we need to get this. We've not gotten it. We're still laboring under the smother board, and we've got to see it and realize it's breaking us apart personally and interpersonally and interculturally. It's bad medicine to be trapped in the smother board. So we've got to see it, we've got to detect it, we've got to see how to call it out. So what we'll do in our next meditation is to follow the trail of our great revered traditions, 4 of them, for example, and notice that every step, when we hit the wall, the next teacher would come and say, we've got to go deeper. And when we do that, we keep pulling it back, and we keep pulling it back. Whatever the step across, we keep pulling it back to where we understand it, and we're still stalled. After 2,500 years of our greatest traditions and teachings, being called by the source to the Unum force to cross over, we keep downloading it into our matrix. We're trapped in our matrix. That's just what I call the smother board. It's a technology of processing ourselves and our world and our language and our consciousness and making our cultures and ourselves and our lives. There's a matrix that we're using. And it's using us because we're not free when we're in it and can't see it. You've got to come. That's why freedom is here. To be a free people, to be a free individual, you've got to break the bounds and cross into the open free range as a free range human here, not a caged human. So in our next meditation, we will go deeper to look at the origin of a smother board as seen by our great teachers in very different ways. And with source science, we could see more clearly, oh, that's the smother board. We couldn't hear it. We couldn't see it. Our great teachers are calling it out, hitting it, and we intractably, we get pulled back into where we are. We need to see that urgently. And in the 18th meditation, we'll build upon that and then begin to see why. All right, let's do the medical ontology. Source science gives us a deeper diagnostic that if we're desourced and trapped in the fragmenter, the technology that fragments and polarizes and breaks, we're going to suffer wide-ranging human pathologies from the smother board. So in meditation number 18, we're going to go deeper into the science and are guided towards to just see how our broken selves, our broken relationships, we can't have love, we can't have intimacy, we can't really reach ourselves. We're broken from ourselves. We're divided within us with that technology. We can't flourish. Our mind, our body is separated. We can't do the yoga in that space. We can't find the Christ in that space. So we're broken inside, our relationships are broken, our political forms of life are fragmented. The civic space is uncivic and uncivil because it's not dialogue, it's monologue, and we're broken down and it's dysfunctional, and our workplace and our violence to nature because we don't see that nature is sacred and the presence of the infinite. So the whole climate deterioration and degradation, all is connected with being desourced. That's meditation number 18 that's coming. 17, we're going to just look at the history and see, wow, look what we've not been seeing in calling out the smother board. That's going to be our next 17, and number 18 is going to be look at these vast separated pathologies, psychology, psychopathology, human relational pathologies, workplace, political, as vastly diverse. They're coming from one source, from fragmentation. Our great teachers saw that, but we haven't been able to put it together because we didn't have the unum scope to see it. So number 18, we're going to look deeply as never before seen. That's the point I'm stressing, that when you get the source code and source science, the unum code, you're able to see what was not visible before. We can see this motherboard. We could see the suffering. We could see why democracy can't work in the smotherboard space. We can see that humanity has been in a smotherboard culture and civilization for eons and suffering deeply. And we can end the suffering. That's the main medical ontology point. We can listen to the genius of our great teachers. We can get the Enlightenment code. We're all born for that. We're children of the Logos. We're Logos sapiens. We're not smother sapiens. We're not here. This is not who we are. We're deformed here. And when we get well formed into the source code, into the unum power, into the compassion and love, into ethics and reason, and knowledge and science, and human relations. So we're going to see in our next two meditations a deepening, and in number 18 we'll see the source of pathologies. And then we'll go deeper after that and say, so what would it look like if culture here is fragmented, broken, suffering with an invisible crisis that's life-threatening? What would culture look like if we opened up the code and entered the space of awakened, enlightened, being in the light, being in the Christ, being in the yoga, being in the Buddha, being in the science? What would it be like? To not have ideologies, to not have separations and polarizations, which are coming from our smotherboard. If we got rid of that smotherboard and overrode it and matured beyond it and let it go to a more mature technology of being a human, where I'm flowing with being in the zone, what would culture look like across the planet for all of us? That's what we're going to do in the sequel. So there's a lot in the wings for us. So stay with us. Let's take a break. I know this is intense, and thank you for holding with me. And do come back, and we'll resume in the sequel in number 17 next time.